administering the survey. And I have not, I've put, if you look in the chat, I went ahead and put links to, you should be able to see them. Just put in links to the agenda and then to the latest draft, which of course I'm working on, pretty much even while we're talking, I'm working on it. But I haven't, I've done quite a bit. So if you have a chance this next week to review the initial getting your campus ready, I've pretty much done with that, I think. And so would really love to have your reviews on that. Moving forward, I'd love to have your guidance on what should be included in the administration section. And then if we have an opportunity, I'd like to follow up on something that was raised last week where we were talking about third parties managing data. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen with the current draft and show you just kind of what we've got. Here we go. Okay. All right. Okay, so coming down. So for administration, oh my gosh, where is it? I can't even know. I don't even know if I've got it started here. Okay, here we are. Yeah, no, I don't really even have it started. So I thought I had more. I'm so sorry. Keep forgetting where I'm at. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing then, since there really isn't much for us to do. But one of the things that I know we want to include is information about the platform. So currently we are able to offer the survey in the Qualtrics and the SurveyMonkey platform. We can't really require that they use one or the other of those, right? And so if they do end up using a third-party vendor, they're probably going to enter that on their as well. What we can do are make recommendations, some of which can become rules about how the platform must handle the data. And I know that we'll get into that more when we're talking about data handling, but there are certain, for example, on both SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics, you can set the platform so that it doesn't collect IP addresses, which I think is pretty important because that way you can't link it back to the student. And I think we can talk about some of and again, that kind of blurs with data, but talking about some of the security features, why you might not, why using Google or Microsoft Office Forms might not be appropriate. I think one of the things too we could do would be to have them check with their IT folk to ensure that the platform that they're using has appropriate and robust security. Does that sound about right for folks? Okay. Anything else we should think about in terms of platform?
I guess I just have a quick question because given that the survey we provide is only on SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics, it's really hard to imagine someone would want to use like Google Form instead. It means that this person needs to copy paste so many things and then like let people and pilot test the survey once again, and then like do that. I think just for the pure sake of saving their own time, it's hard to imagine people would do that. And also, I remember most of the school either have Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, right? They wouldn't like really just like not use the already prepared survey on these two platforms for the pure sake of saving money to buy them.
Yeah, I think that's why we put so much effort into getting it into Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey, was to make it really like so convenient for them to use those platforms that they wouldn't want to use something else. But again, they can choose to do that if they want, and maybe they don't want to spend $300 on SurveyMonkey or something. So because that's what the EDU licenses cost. So I think we need to, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I was going to say question about that. If they did choose to use another platform like Google Forms, which does sound like it would cost more than $300 worth of staff time to do that, but who am I to say? If they're the ones inputting it, they could potentially inadvertently alter like the skip logic or something like that, and that would invalidate their responses in terms of the comparison to the rest of our data set, right? So would we want to have some like kind of like big black box caution that's like, we can't require you, but here's what would happen if you did put it in another platform. If you did put it in another platform, here's what you're risking. And then would we need them to like submit the survey itself just to ensure that it was correct if they were going to use a platform? Like, would we need to be able to see it before we I don't think I'm seeing anything, but would the royal we here need to see that survey itself, like that Google form, to ensure that it actually did have the correct skip logic or whatever, before we were able to include that data in our data set? I'm going like catastrophic thinking now, so shut me up if I'm, yeah.
Can I jump in? I can't answer that, but I actually think, Martina, that you're that's not catastrophic thinking. That's like first level in thinking, which is, I mean that complimentarily. Like I think it could get way worse. Forgive me if I missed the last meeting, I think, and maybe, but this is an unfunded mandate. Can't we just say to schools, your two options are to do the Qualtrics or to pay the $300 it takes to buy SurveyMonkey once a year to get this executed? I mean, it just seems absolutely impossible to me that given how much time and effort has gone into creating these two versions of it, that we should be even entertaining, allowing anybody to think that they could convert it for their own purposes. I mean, the personnel time alone would dwarf the $300 cost of subscribing to SurveyMonkey, and it's the cheap version, right? Like Qualtrics is probably the better version, but SurveyMonkey is the cheap version, and it would take a little bit of startup, but to figure out how to use SurveyMonkey if you've never used it before, like getting all of the emails in and whatnot, I find it to be not nearly as intuitive and step by step as you would like it to be. But I mean, sorry, I'm talking too long to simply say, can't we just say sorry, but the state is the one that mandated that you were going to pay these $300 or more, not us. But these are your two options, and you got to figure out which one you're going to use. I think we'd actually, in fact, I'll go one step further and say, I'll bet we would be doing, speaking as an IR professional myself, I'll bet we would be doing a bunch of other IR offices and officers a huge favor by saying, don't even entertain inputting this yourself. These are your options. Tell your administration to find $300 to pay for SurveyMonkey and the legislature.
I mean, in terms of an unfunded mandate, $300 isn't so terrible.
And I would say considerations, list of considerations if they try to do this themselves. So the considerations would be manpower cost. Consideration is that they have to align everything. The skip logic has to align with us. We have to make sure that you have a way to accept the data. I mean, the survey is anonymous. And so it's a lot of things that they have to consider when doing that, as well as not only the cost, but the time that it takes to do that. So those are some considerations. Yeah, I would think that, yeah, if they create the survey, then they need to send it back to HEC to approve it and make sure that it has the skip logic and everything is okay before, because we can't just trust that they did it and they implemented it and then it's wrong. So I would think something, getting a green light from us is necessary, or from HEC, not us, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, someone else raised their hand.
Yeah, no, thanks. I was actually just raising my hand to say the same thing, that if they were to use that would be the only way that I think we could make an exception, is if they were to send their survey in whatever other format to be approved. But then again, that takes manpower on HEC's part. Do we have someone at HEC that would be able to then review all of those surveys to make sure that they follow the logic and that once their turn, that we'll be able to compare the data. Again, I think that like, even for small schools, I'm a small school, not as small as some schools, but I'm a small school, and the $300 would not be undoable for me, for me and my department in order to implement this. And I work with a bunch of the other regional coordinators at much smaller schools and community colleges, and I think they could probably also find a way to swing $300. So I think that making that like the option, right? You can either take Qualtrics or you can spend $300 to this, or last case scenario, right? You can spend more resources to put it into another that then we would have to approve. I mean, yeah,
Can
I like just the two.
I think that, sorry to jump in here, am I cutting anybody off? I don't want to step out of turn here. I think the idea of thinking that anybody at HEC or on this committee would review this is also dramatically, I mean, part of the testing that's been going on right now is about getting feedback about the substance of it, but also it's to find out whether or not every little conditional pathway has been correctly programmed into the, I mean, think about how the people who have been working on both the Qualtrics and the SurveyMonkey versions of this have been putting in, I have no idea, Rowan, how many, or Kevin, how many hours those people put in just to build it and check it. Like the idea that somebody could proofread somebody's third-party survey in any sort of accurate or meaningful way in something less than, I mean, 50, 75, 100 hours of work. Like, I think again, the state mandated all of us to do this. I say we just blame the state and say these are your two options, because frankly, the others simply are unviable. The idea that anybody could proof that, I think, is not going to be viable in the long run. Or in the short term. I just don't think it can work.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying. And the reason that we, that this program like paid the money for Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey was to make it so much easier for them to do it this way than to try to struggle and do it the hard way, right? So yeah, so I agree that I love the idea of a list of considerations for the platform and the black box warning, or caution, like you have to do this, think about these things first. We cannot mandate them to use a commercial platform. Right? We can't do that. And we would have to figure out how to proof it if they chose to use another one. I think my biggest concern with this is that idea of the third-party vendor, because they would probably enter it into their own platform. And trying to figure out, so that's one thing I've been thinking about a lot is, could we can certainly write a rule that says, if you choose not to use the platforms provided to you by the state, you need to make your survey available so that we can check your to make sure that it's accurately entered. That might be a little bit trickier with some of the third-party platforms because they're going to be proprietary, right? A for-profit organization is not necessarily going to want to let us have access to that. So trying to figure out how to write that rule so that they have to let us see that, I think, is important. The other thing is the idea of data handling and what you're going to do with the data. And I want to come back around to that, but yeah, I think that we can say, we recommend that you use the survey in the formats provided by the state. That can be a recommendation. We can say, if you're not going to use them, you need to be thinking about these things. And we can try to write a rule that says if you're not using one of the platforms provided by the state, you have to provide the survey for proofreading by HEC, but we would need to accept it if they chose to use a different platform. Yeah. Jennifer, I can hear you. I can see you shaking your head.
Rowan,
like, okay, that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It sounds like a nightmare to me as well. I would hope that any school would look at it and say, it is worth the cost of paying SurveyMonkey rather than trying to pay somebody to input this for it. Question though, Rowan, like how much of the infrastructure that it currently exists to get this project up and running is going to carry over on a permanent basis? And heck, like, is there some possible avenue by which schools could ask HEC to do the administration of the survey for them via Qualtrics, or is the Qualtrics subscription going to expire? Is the office that runs this going to disappear? Like, is that a viable pathway to sort of try to keep people from even considering this option?
So I still don't know what support for the survey is going to look like after June 30th. Still waiting to hear about that. So can't really answer that question. I know Kevin will be here, and Kevin is, so sorry, Kevin, not trying to dump on you, but I know that HEC is committed to providing support for the survey. You know, that's just that we have to do that. We're required to do that by statute. So one way or another, it will happen. A couple of the states have had the state actually administer the survey, but that's really problematic because that means that the state is getting data from all of the students everywhere. And then the state has access to all of that data. So we can't really offer that as an option for schools. You know, we'll do it for you. We can't really say that. And the legislation is really clear that it's the institution's responsibility to make sure that the administration of the survey happens. So yeah, we can continue to provide the base survey in a Qualtrics and a SurveyMonkey form. We can commit to that. I know that for sure. So, you know, they don't need to worry about, you know, in 2 years when the survey is revised that they won't, that, you know, that they would need to change platforms. Those will be available, but as long as, you know, the state continues to do that. But yeah, actually, I can't even promise anything 2 years out. I'm going to scratch that, but hopefully. Yeah, I know. Who knows where we'll be 2 years from now.
Didn't we get the Qualtrics license for 4 years, or was it 3 years?
I don't remember, Kevin. That's a really good question.
All right.
Yeah. I think it's likely that we'll continue to be able to offer SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics because they are used by other programs within HEC. So, okay, that's all incredibly helpful for the platforming. For the timing issue, so thinking about survey administration, I keep saying, and this is based on a lot of the research that's been done, that the best time to offer the climate survey is going to be in the spring. And most of the research says offer it after spring break. So by the, you know, when students come back. So they'll be sort of in that tail end of that last half of the second semester. The reason for that, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, and I think the most important one, is for students who are entering the campus at the beginning of that academic year, you want to be able to collect as much data from them about their experiences during their first year as possible. And so waiting until after spring break, if terrible things are going to happen, they've probably already happened by spring break. And so you'll be able to collect that data, I think is the thinking there. The other reason for doing it that way is that it ensures that schools aren't going to try to rush this into practice, that they're going to have to take, because they're getting it in September, right? They're going to have to take at least 6 months to really think about implementing the survey. They'll have time to do all of the messaging and that sort of stuff. They can offer it during just a reminder, they have 2 years after we give them the survey to implement it. So they could implement it during the 25-26 year, or they could wait until the 26-27 year. That's their choice. Is there anyone who wants to say, well, maybe we should advise, or maybe there's another time of the year, the academic year, that might be a better time to offer the survey? You don't have any issue with that? Okay. The other thing is the window for how long the survey should be open. And generally the researchers are recommending about 4 weeks. You don't seem to, you have kind of that bell curve, right, of when you're going to get responses, but 4 weeks with multiple, remember to fill out the survey messaging during that time seems to get about the most response. It's not really cost effective to keep it open longer than 4 weeks. If you close it before 4 weeks, you miss some opportunities to get participants. But I'm going to defer to those of you who do institutional research and what do you think? Do you think 4 weeks is about right? Too long? Not enough?
My experience is that it's less a bell curve and more like a half-life. Like as soon as it goes out, you'll get the highest number of responses. The next time you remind, you'll get half that many. The next time you remind, you'll get half that many. And so that will just keep declining. If there's any deviation from that, it's when you send out the last one that says, this is your last chance. And then sometimes it will jump up. But for the most part, it's in constant decline. So I think that anywhere, frankly, from 2 weeks to 4 weeks would probably achieve pretty close to the same volume. I can't think of any reason not to leave it open 4 weeks, except the possibility that people just kind of start to hear it as noise, and you don't really want them thinking about this as just a perpetual obligation that they hear about in the back of their minds. But I mean, I think anywhere from 2 to 4 works just fine. And definitely spring. I mean, not to come back to that, but giving it to people who've just stepped a foot on campus is not going to get us good information. So definitely spring.
And I agree with Kelly. Usually 2 weeks, but then you get the stragglers after 2 weeks because it's like diminishing decline. People are like, oh, I saw it. My president or someone sent it out. I just haven't had a chance to get around to it. So yeah. So it's diminishing returns, but you'll still get a little bit more. You're going to get the bulk of it during the first couple of weeks.
Looks like Andrew's question in the chat might be directed towards Kelly or Adea.
Yes, definitely. Like you should avoid overlapping probably the last week of classes and then study weeks, finals week, anything like that. I would agree with that. We run a general education survey at Willamette, or we've started to. We've done this for 2 years. It seems to work pretty good. We run it. It's sent out to students with senior standing in terms of credits, and we just ask them to comment on several of the elements of their general education experience. And we send that out a week before spring break, leave it open during spring break, leave it open 1 week after spring break. That actually seems to work pretty well, not in any dramatic sort of way, but it keeps it away from things like finals week, which I think you definitely want to avoid. And you don't want it being in that kind of interim week between quarters or semesters either, if there is one. So, I mean, keeping it in the active semester, I think is the right way to go.
That's interesting. When we did our campus climate survey, we did it before break. So that's interesting that you did it before break, kept it open during break, and when they returned. So there's 3 possible periods. I actually like that idea. Oh, I'm sorry.
The logic, Adea, was that we thought those were 3 separate weeks to people in terms of whether there were obstacles to them or not. We just sort of hoped that it would. I don't have any evidence to support that claim other than it does get a fairly decent response rate. Our response rate this time around was about 30%, which is not bad. So, yeah. I do think for this survey, at least initially in the early years, the response rate, we can expect it to be probably slightly higher than typical response rates, as long as there's enough kind of promotion of the idea and people understand that it's new, and given the topic and how much people care about this topic and related topics, I suspect that it's going to be better than we might expect, but still not great.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that one thing that's probably going to be true is that every campus is a little bit different. So I know that at Reed, the institutional research director actually suggested leaving it open during reading week because he said they're desperate to try to put off completing their finals and essays, and they're looking for any kind of procrastination tool that they can find. But I think that's really different. And I agree. I think those 3 periods that you mentioned, before break, during break, after break might make the most sense. Right. And yeah, thank you for saying that, making sure that there's, what do you call that? There's like a survey calendar. Is there another term for that? Okay. So checking the institutional survey calendar to make sure. So for example, if you're doing the, National College Health Survey, that's every other year, right? So you would and that's a really long one. So you would probably want to skip or alternate years there. So, okay. So survey calendar. So we can say, so can we recommend 3 to 4 weeks, and some of the considerations for your specific campus? Yeah, I know, 9 p.m. on Sunday, right? Yeah. So maybe we can just say, consider, the survey calendar on your specific campus, and consider, when, talk to your institutional research people, when are people most likely to complete surveys, and pick a 3 to 4 week period that is around spring break. So, slightly before, during, and after, or just after, something like that. Okay. Jennifer and Jimmy, would that work on your campuses? Do you think those would that timing around spring break?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To avoid our dead week, I would probably do, like Kelly said, and open it the week before spring break. But we have a lot of residential students who actually stay on our campus during spring break. And so that would probably give them an opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it would work. I mean, I don't have a sense of what our full institutional survey schedule is. And so I think it would really depend, but I think for the most part, it probably would be fine. But we'll see.
Okay, so maybe we can make those a couple of suggestions. Some campuses find that opening it a week before spring break, keeping it open during spring break, and and then that caution about not running into finals is really helpful too.
If I could jump in, I'll just put out for community colleges, it's different because we have rolling enrollment every term, right? So I'll just add that. So there might be a consideration of adding language so that community colleges see themselves in this. We would happily do it spring term, if only to have more time. So it's not a concern. The timeline isn't a concern for us. Just thinking about that language piece.
Yeah, thank you. Carolyn, is there anything else in terms of that? Like, if we did suggest that spring break, that spring semester, are there any other considerations? I know that sometimes the term periods are different. So if we're talking about semesters versus,
we're quarters, so that's the other
quarters,
thing to
yeah,
consider. And
okay.
PSU's quarters too. So thinking about institutions that are quarter versus semester systems and the length of time we want to ask people to complete them, because depending on the length, it might be longer than our quarter system, right? We are 11 weeks long in general. So that's the only other thing to consider.
Okay, and Jennifer, your quarters too, and how long are your quarters?
10 weeks.
Okay. Right. Thank you for that. I think in terms of semesters, because yeah, but that I'm thinking about some of the smaller schools too don't have that kind of semester or even maybe necessarily a quarter. It's a program, right? Okay. Okay. So watching that language. So y'all will keep me honest on that when you're reviewing this section. Make sure that I've got that inclusive language in there. Okay. Okay. All right. And then incentives. So one thing I was thinking about in terms of incentives is that we know that incentives up to a certain point, and a few years ago it was $20. I have no idea what the kind of if it was more than 20, people were not more likely to complete the survey. If it was less than 20, they were less likely to complete the survey. So most of the researchers who offered incentives found that about $20 seemed to work. Again, that was a few years ago, so I don't know if that number has changed. Our colleges are not going to be offering $20 to complete the survey. I don't think that's just not going to happen, right? So, but thinking about the value of the things that are offered. So there are a couple ways that incentives can be offered. One is that everybody who does this gets a free ice cream cone, or everybody who does this gets a bookstore discount card, or you set it up as a raffle, and you can enter in to win an iPad. For some reason, iPads are always the gift of choice. So I think, and of course I was like, oh my God, I want a Zamboni ride. But then I was thinking, is it, if it's too much of a fun incentive, does that make it seem like we're not taking the topic seriously, right?
I really don't think so. I think
Okay.
if any, it only helps people to want to fill out the survey. I would say that at Reed, as a student, the best incentive for filling out a survey I've ever seen is actually an iPad. It's for a student to talk about like race on campus and the experience of being like racial minority, and whether they like it's from the DI department. So it is also not a survey that talks about anything that light, but because of that, I know a lot of people fill that out. I personally also fill that out because I like the idea of having an iPad, even though it's a lottery. I would say even like counterbalance how heavy the survey is a little bit, thinking about that. Oh, maybe like after I fill this out, I can get something sweet to eat, like ice cream, or I can buy some snack from a bookstore, or there's a possibility that I can earn an iPad. I personally never feel offended when there's a fun incentive there for a survey that talks about serious things.
I just wanted to say something from my recent, first of all, the budget for this, the incentives, is that coming from the school? Because I remember, so iPads wasn't in the UP's budgets. We had to have a lottery, and the max you could win was, I think the president gave us $500. So there was a lot of $10 prizes, then $50, and then I think the final prize was $100. And we were happy to get that $500 commitment. But I will say that the incentive was put at the end. We wanted to make sure that the incentive was put at the end, and it was optional after we said, thank you for giving us your feedback, and inform them what we were going to use the data for and how it was going to improve campus. And we said, if you would like to have that incentive, then you could go and put your information in a different survey, because we wanted to make sure that it was not connected with the actual survey itself. So they clicked on the link, they got a different survey, which was something the school made up. Well, we made up a secondary survey so we could get their contact information and put them in a lottery. And we would have the lottery each week. We would have a lottery so that people can keep playing and people will know people are winning. So we had the lottery, but I did have one student said that they thought it was bribery or something like that when they were thinking like we were, bribing them to take it. And I was like, really? But that was just one student. But with our survey, only a few people actually went to take the other survey. It was not that many. So yeah, and they actually complained about the reward because we went to a gift card for the bookstore, and they're like, we're tired of gift cards to the bookstore. Be more creative. So that's the only thing I can give you with feedback. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think schools will know the culture of the kinds of incentives that work on their campus. I don't know. So one of the things that I've been working on is the reliance agreement with our institution. And so I also think it depends on how folks are going to use their data. So like if we're thinking about this as research, you'll have to report that. If not, and it's just kind of like a state requirement assessment, they can just send it out. So just to note that, like, if if we write this in, if we're going to use the reliance agreement with the University of Oregon, if folks want that, then they'll have to report whatever it is that they are using as an incentive. My experience with incentives have also been, as a part of like, it's sort of a cultural incentive, but to say like, we're trying to get this many people and reporting back how many folks have actually filled it out. And maybe there's a certain level at which there's a commitment or if we get X amount of students to fill this out, we will do an additional scholarship for our victim assistance fund or something like that. So, thinking less individual, which I think still works, but something that also then contributes to, I think, the point or the community that's impacted by this work, I think has been really satisfying for folks who wouldn't otherwise do it on their own.
Yeah, I appreciate this a lot. First of all, yay, my mouse is finally charged so I can use it. Yeah, I think just one flag to raise. I appreciate the sensitivity, I think, around being trauma aware with the incentives. Just to share a quick anecdote, our local rape crisis center, their giant fundraiser a couple years ago was a firearm raffle. Yeah, we maybe don't want schools to like do that related to this issue area, right? Zamboni ride feels really different. So I know that's a pretty nebulous thing that I wanted to raise, but I think that kind of speaks to maybe this conversation that we're having. Also just wanted to uplift what Kelly said in the chat that yes, just that as well. But that's it.
It's not just rural New Mexico, Rowan. We have those things in Klamath Falls. That's actually a very common elementary school raffle item here. So,
oh my gosh.
yeah, more than one elementary school raffle I've been a part of that's been a prize you could win. I was like, oh my God.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I'm a little more familiar with Las Cruces. Yeah. I know. Martina's like,
I'm just thinking about like the lethality assessment that we do, and like question 1 is like, does the perpetrator have access to a firearm? Question number 1. Oh,
Yes,
wow.
yes, we gave it to him in a raffle.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so
At
much
the
for
elementary
asking. Yes, you provided it for us. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So trauma informed, really important. Love the idea of a donation for a fund for victim services or for prevention programming or something like that. Love that. Yeah. And then thinking about socioeconomic level, that's something to think about too, that you could potentially bias, that should be something. And then I like the idea too of the weekly incentives. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if you have kind of a graduated, we'll give $25 the first week and $10 the second week. And, you might, if there's an altruistic motive, you might increase your response rates, your early response rates that way. Okay.
I'll say to the point about biasing, which I think is a really great point. I mean, this is like an almost 20-year-old example, so apologies for being ancient. But at my very small college in LA, they used to do like a your choice of sort of a thing, so that someone could have their choice of an iPad, a $100 gift card to whatever, or a $100 donation to blah, blah, blah. And I know that was always very popular because it really allows for you to put your money where it goes. And I remember like I won something at our like graduation ceremonies and I was like, I don't need to take this with me. I'm literally driving to Oregon in 5 minutes. Like, I don't want this. And I ended up donating it forward and felt really good about that. And it stuck with me. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that too. I don't think that's ancient. I think people still want choices.
For the smaller schools that have budgetary issues, will they have incentives? Will we have other ideas for them if they don't have an incentive structure? Do we have some ideas for them?
I think incentives can be low or no cost. Again, this is very dated, but one of the incentives at one point when I was in college was like lunch at the president's table. And that cost them the cost of lunch. And again, very small college, so it was like at our cafeteria, we had one cafeteria. But I think that there's a lot of things that people can be creative about. And like a really like high value one that costs no money is something like priority registration for something, or you know, like access that would otherwise cost a little bit of money but doesn't, or something. Like I think there's a lot of ways campuses can get creative. Oh man, first place in the parking spot lottery, that would be at UO, that would be like knives out. People would fight for that.
Better than an iPad, right? Seriously. Or maybe even like a free parking pass, right? I would go nuts for that. I would have taken every single survey they asked me to if it meant I got a free parking pass for 1 year, right?
For 1 month, I would have done it.
Right.
I do have one little suggestion, because as a student, I know that at least at Reed, students really like to share and talk about like social activism things on Instagram, on their social media. So I'm thinking whether it would be great that like after someone filled the survey, they can have a like very pretty like little page saying that congratulations, Belle, you failed the survey. You help us to like increase the like transparency of like sexual misconduct on campus, and then they can screenshot it and very conveniently like share it on their social media, because like it is a kind of like moral signaling and Read that like people sort of are expected to have this kind of social media activities to prove that you're like leftist enough, you're progressive enough. And a lot of people like really like to send those things on social media daily. So I'm thinking about maybe it could be a thing that we encourage students to do. And I imagine at least like I read like in this kind of very progressive like campus like culture, it would be very useful like to literally let the student who failed the survey to like promote the survey again, while at the same time they feel very good that they contributed to something good.
I like that, Belle, like community badges. It's like you've participated in a community badge. I like that. Oh, wow.
I also wonder if we can ask, I know, again, this might be for bigger schools, but asking them to work with their student activities department in that thread of like the badges, right? I know my university was all about the t-shirt giveaways. We could even just something like that, right? If you find a couple extra, however many bucks for insert thing, right? We might be able to offer that.
To that end,
To be,
oh, sorry.
oh no, go ahead, Martina, go ahead.
I was just going to say to that end, I'm just thinking about like different campus committees. I know that there have been times when like all of Greek life has sent out a thing that's like everyone has to do this, and I would say that for something like this, we might caution against like allowing or encouraging any of those groups to make this a requirement, because like in Greek, like if I know that like if they say you have to, then you have to, and everyone is going to, and that feels like coercive and not trauma informed. Likewise with like student athletics, I feel weird about that, like making it a requirement versus like suggesting it as a nice thing through something like campus activities, like was just suggested. So.
I'm glad you went first. All I was going to say was, I love the brainstorming here. Like I'm sort of making notes myself. There's a couple of ideas here that I've never thought of that I want to try. Jimmy's gone now, but I love the idea that you would have thresholds that if you just tell everybody, because now everybody is incentivized. But don't forget, any decision about an incentive is probably going to sort of give some group a higher incentive than others. It doesn't mean you shouldn't use them, because we're talking about poor response rates across the board. And I think generally more information is better than less information in this kind of an environment. So I'm totally down with incentives, but even something like priority registration, which I thought was a great idea, would leave out anybody who's graduating, anybody who doesn't have to register anymore. It doesn't exclude them from survey, but it leaves them out of the incentive structure. And so you may end up, but still a great idea. I don't at all want to suggest that. I think that's one of the better ideas that I've heard here, because it is uniformly relevant If you are a student, with the exception of that one group that is graduating no longer needs to register, it is uniformly relevant. It's more relevant to younger students than to older students. Older students think that the classes aren't going to be high competition. But anyway, FYI, there's going to be bias risk, and we'll never know who got left out and who didn't. So
you kind of need an incentive structure that'll kind of incentivize different groups of people.
exactly. Yes. Excellent point, Adea. Yep. Agreed.
Thank you for always bringing us back down to earth a little bit, Kelly. I really appreciate it.
No, it's the wet blanket phenomenon. People don't like me at parties because of this.
Martina and I can tell you what happens when people find out what we do for work at parties. Like, oh, that's such important work. And then they go to get a drink with someone else. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
no,
you
I'm,
get a
I'm no
lengthy
fun at parties
disclosure.
either.
Right. Yeah.
Right, yeah, no fun at parties.
Yeah.
That's why I tell people that I work in nonprofit.
Uh-huh.
End of explanation.
Right, I say I'm a college administrator.
Mhm.
I don't go further anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I was out to lunch with some colleagues once, and the waitress asked where we worked, and we told her, and she slid into the booth with us and gave us a lengthy disclosure. Yeah, it's whatever works.
It
She
seems
felt
like all these incentives that we've been describing just recently are kind of intrinsic incentives to the university instead of external things. So maybe a mixture of intrinsic, like parking, graduation, things that they would have to pay for on their own, or is intrinsic in what they're doing. So I think that like a mixture of those. That sounds really, really good.
Yeah, I know that some of the smaller schools, if you have a large school that has a fundraising department, you can't do this, but some of the smaller schools might be able to go to one of the local like coffee shops and solicit a donation from them. So that might be something to think about too. And that's kind of extrinsic. That's something that anybody could pretty much use. So I think what I'm hearing mostly is a mix of incentives personalized for your campus, your student populations. Be sure to get student input on what's most valuable to them.
Yes.
And you don't really need to have a lot of money to make an incentive structure work.
And are you going to toss out some ideas so they'll know what you're actually talking about?
Yeah, we can have a list of like suggestions. So these are some things that people have suggested or that schools have used that have been effective. And don't make a survey about incentives. Just ask around. Right. The student activities folks are going to tell you what students respond to most, because they're always trying to get more student engagement. Right.
I just think I remember my last director, IR, we had to go to the president or the provost's office to release funding. I guess when you put together a committee, all that is they're gonna come together to get that funding together. I think that's why you need the committee to get this together. Yeah, instead of a person administrating this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Right. So we have a few minutes left. The last section on messaging, I think we can hold off on that because I feel like I've got enough to do here. I just wanted to give you a quick follow-up on the third-party survey platform. So, the idea that schools might contract with a third-party contractor. We already talked about some of the challenges there in ensuring that the version of the survey that they use is the same as the one that other schools would be using. And it would have to be the skip logic. Everything would have to be. The other concern that, as I've been thinking about this more, and I'm really embarrassed that this didn't occur to me 18 months ago, is there's nothing in the legislation that protects the anonymity of the data. It says that you have to make sure that when you're providing a summary report, that the information in that report is de-identified, but there's nothing that limits the uses that the data can be put to. And there's nothing that limits who is going to, there's nothing that, that protects that data. So I think it's really important that we make it clear that you cannot collect, it says you are not required, they cannot be required to provide identifying information, but there's nothing that says you can't ask for identifying information. And especially when we're looking at third-party contractors, I was just thinking about, this is a river of data that could be incredibly valuable. And third-party contractors are going to get the colleges to pay them to get this incredibly valuable, to pay them, and they're getting this incredibly valuable data. So there's an opportunity to potentially write a rule that, we can't prohibit them from using a third party, but we can use language that would protect the data. And I'm wondering, there's not a lot of time left, but I'm wondering if, especially those of you who work in the institutions, if there's some language that you could suggest that we could use in a rule that would help ensure that the data is not being viewed by people with motives other than improving services on campus, and it's not being used for purposes other than improving services on campus. Yeah, I know. I feel, and that's something to think about. I don't expect you in the next 4 minutes to come up with language, but if you have ideas about things that we should be thinking about in terms of protecting, how we could say in a rule, you must protect the data from being used for purposes other than improving responses on campus. I'd appreciate hearing that. Would IRB help? Potentially, I don't know. I think Kelly and Jimmy and Adea, well, Jimmy's gone, but I think and Jennifer, you all might be able to answer that better.
I think whoever's administering it is the pressure point. Like IRB, there isn't any. I can't imagine there's anything IRB could do that an IR professional, IR director themselves couldn't be much more agile and active about protecting data on. I mean, we can all look. I'll look to see. I'm trying to think of what the one starting point for this, Rowan, would be to simply say it is the expectation that that any participant in the process, whether it's third-party vendor or institutional research professionals, all comport, consistent with the ethical standards of, and now I need to figure out exactly who we point to that says the ethical standards, where those come from.
I remember when we did the head survey and we had to do the IRB process, and we had to take what the heads said they were going to do with the data, and we had to fill that into the IRB because we had to report how they're going to suppress the data and all data handling techniques and what they're going to do with the data. And all that had to be in the literature, because I couldn't make up what they were going to do. They had to give us the literature, and then I put it in the IRB for them. So, yeah, I don't know.
Also, I'm going to see if I would think that AIR, the Association of IR Professionals, they probably have an ethical statement somewhere. So I'll try to track that down, Rowan. I think that one of my concerns is even third-party vendors, even if they don't actively add some identifying information, they still have contact information. And then there's just a simple ethical question of, are they going to use that somehow on their own? Are people whose emails go to those third-party vendors going to suddenly start getting solicited for something else? And that would be highly inappropriate. So I think there's several layers to this. I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah. I think one thing we can do is to make it very clear that the survey needs to be sent. You're right. They're going to have that pool of emails, but they'll probably have it already. I think making it clear that there's no requirements that they follow ethics anywhere in the law, which is kind of problematic. But I really do like the idea of, you know, we can make a rule saying that they, as part of data handling, they need to state which ethical rules they're following. You know, are they following American Psychological or Belmont or whatever, right? So if you have, Kelly, that recommendation would be really helpful. I'm going to try to draft a rule today, and this is separate from the survey, right? This is you as professionals. I'm asking for your expertise in another area. I'm going to draft a rule today, and I would love to be able to send it out to the folks on this and have you take a look at it and add to it if you think that would be helpful, or comment on it. So if that's okay with you, I'll go ahead and do that. Okay. Yeah. So
I will say from what I've heard from people who've taken the survey, they're saying everything is very, very well thought out. I said, that's uncommon for heck. You know, I don't know. I haven't but they said it's very well thought out. So that's a compliment of what all the work we've done.
yeah, I've been kind of looking through some of those too. I look forward to discussing that more with you on Friday. My goal with that, just so you know, is to I know folks have to leave, but I'm reviewing the comments that we got back on the feedback from the pilot survey. I'm going to put it into a summary format and send that out to you for you to take a look at. And I'll have some suggestions to make changes based on the feedback that we got. So you should be getting that within the next day or two. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate you being here. As always, you're so smart, and I love these conversations. Take care. Belle, bye.